Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be back for another solo episode. Today, I want to talk to everybody about this idea of stress, parental stress, personal stress, how to manage it. And I want to touch a little bit on this sort of conundrum of time. I had asked followers on TikTok and on Instagram, do you find yourself saying there's just never enough time? Or do you feel that way? Like, do you truly end each day going, if I just had 3 extra hours, it would be so much better? And it was unanimous, absolutely unanimous on both platforms. The answer was yes, me, hand raised. I am feeling that way all the time. And I wanted to address it because I think it's fair and it's valid. And I've certainly experienced that myself. And it isn't until now that I'm starting to really look at time through a different lens and I'm starting to really process stress in a very different way. So, part of what prompted this episode was the US Surgeon General's warning, Vivek Murthy, or Murthy, I think is how you pronounce that. I'm familiar with some pieces that he's written, and I think he's actually excellent. He really warns about the challenges for modern day parents and how there is a large percentage of US parents who are reporting that it is difficult to even function. I believe, I could be misquoting, but when I recall the report, I believe it's 40% of parents are struggling to even function through the day because it all feels so overwhelming. So there are a lot of external reasons why this is, and I don't want to downplay that because I think it's really important to be an active citizen. And so things like, America not having paid maternity and paternity leave or family leave, I think can be really, really hard on families. We have a lack of quality childcare that's affordable, right? The real kind of high quality childcare centers tend to be so expensive. They have huge waiting lists. And even within the childcare industry right now, I have friends who own centers and things of that sort. And they're saying like staffing is really challenging. Turnover is really hard. We have classrooms that we have to completely shut down for different reasons. It's really changed since COVID. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that some of these factors are not by our own doing and that we obviously have to sort of think of ways to get through it, but at the same time, just really acknowledge and show yourself grace that it's a really hard time to parent right now. I think we have unique sort of challenges. I mean, even if you look at sort of the landscape of technology and how quickly it's grown and social media and cell phones and, do you let your kids have one? Do you not? Do they get internet? Do they not? Like, there's just so many kind of conundrums and quandaries that we have to constantly work through. So I wanted to take a minute today, and I won't make this a long episode because I want you to be able to get through it and actually practice and use it. But the reason I wanted to do this was I just wanted to give you a way to sort of lean on what I call your inner parent. I've been doing a lot of work with this lately, a lot of work around self-parenting as a process, as a means to heal and to find a way back to emotional well-being, which is really just finding that inner peace within, regardless of what's happening around you. I have worked really hard at developing this process, and it's something that I practice every single day. It's also something that I've used in my own life, not just to parent, but really to enhance the quality of relationships that I have in my life. It's really a way of establishing more presence and peace. It's a way of finding more gratitude in moments when it feels so chaotic. And ultimately, I can tell you that the compound effect of self-parenting myself has been huge. I've been able to expand in ways that I never thought was possible. I can face fears with ease at this point. I mean, ease might be a wrong word, but I look at it and I can befriend that fear and it doesn't get to dictate my next decision. I am able to really consciously decide what works for me and what doesn't. And some of that might be just age and wisdom, and I'm sure that's there, but this parenting process has been such a powerful tool. So I want to use it today, and I want to walk you through how I would use it if A, you are feeling like those parents in the report and saying that you feel so incredibly stressed, or B, if you are somebody who also says, I just don't ever have enough time. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know what's going on. I try to be organized, but the day just gets away from me and it just feels like there's just not enough time. So if this is resonating with you and you're really kind of feeling like, yes, I'm raising my hand, please go on. I need to know what to do. I'm going to host a free workshop on Wednesday, September 25th at noon Eastern Time over Zoom. The replay will be available if you can't make it live. Again, it's totally free. You're going to have information in the show notes about it, but it's basically the idea of parenting yourself, not your kids. I want to teach you how to parent yourself as a means to gain emotional well-being and more inner peace in your life. As you continue to do the inner work that you need to do, it's amazing how your children will benefit from from how you present and how you can connect with them. Often it starts with us, and it's really hard to hear that sometimes. But at the end of the day, the kind of liberating part of that is that you can actually manage and control yourself. So if it's something that you want changed in your outside world, the first place to start is like, what do I need to change on my inside? What inner work do I need to do in order to see that external change? So regarding stress, the first principle or the first tenet in my self-parenting process is really this idea of practicing or mastering the pause, is what I call it. Where can you pause? Where are those moments of overreactivity in your life? Where are those things happening? You know, when my kids were younger, I've talked about this before, but there was a lot of sort of overreactivity when my kids would be disrespectful, right? That was a big trigger for me. So if they answered back in a way that I thought was not acceptable, or if they rolled their eyes, or if they engaged in kind of a tone that I didn't really agree with, or their dad didn't really agree with, that was really triggering for me, and that could easily elicit an overreaction. So I had to really sit with that, and I had to really work at mastering the pause. And the more I paused, guess what happened? The less reactive I became, the more I sat with this idea of like, why does it really bother me outside of the obvious reasons? And it really was because it terrified me that I was going to raise kids that weren't respectful, and that as a result, that was going to be a direct reflection of me as a person and parent. And I was too tethered to enmeshed with who my kids were and who I was, and it wasn't fair really to them. But I also did want to correct the behavior. So I had to really go to them and just say, hey, you know what? I get it. Sometimes you feel frustrated. And when you're frustrated, we say things we don't mean. We've all done that. But from now on, when that happens, and I had to assign an action of what I would do. And because I had that roadmap and because we had these conversations about it, it wasn't hard to implement, and I stopped overreacting. And guess what they started to do? Because I was creating space to pause, because I wasn't flying off the handle when they would do one of these behaviors, or I wasn't snapping right back, which 9 out of 10 times led to escalation on their part, they started to slow down too. We are so connected to our kids. My kids now at 18 and 21 will still say to me, I have to really pause before I answer that. Or they know how to create space. I've never word for word said these things to them. They have learned it by watching. They have learned it by experiencing it through our own relationship. Don't underestimate the power of getting yourself to just pause. So in a recent workshop that I did, I talked about ways to pause. So you don't have to necessarily like go into a deep breathing meditation, and you don't have to be alone. I had a parent on TikTok ask me like, well, I can't get away from my kids in that moment. They're crying or they're doing whatever. I totally get it, right? No, very rarely can we just completely go like, I'm going to another room. I'll see you later. What we really want to think about doing is like, how do you pause and get still within when that moment is becoming chaotic? So let's say your child's screaming, crying about something because you said no, or you didn't give them the thing they wanted. You overreacting in that moment, or yelling or snapping or threatening a timeout or some kind of a punishment, doesn't usually help the situation. It just usually makes your child escalate more. So what do you have to lose in trying to just pause? Just pause. So that just means you're simply not giving in to one of those big reactions that you normally would. And then to give your brain a redirect, just go right into empathy first. Above all else, it needs to be literally less than a phrase at best. And just say, I can see you're having a hard time. I get it. That's it. You don't have to say more than that. If you've already set your boundary and you validate how they're feeling, you don't have to keep explaining why you set the boundary. You don't have to start to get stressed because you know now this tantrum's going to last however long. They're allowed to feel the way that they need to feel. It's important for us to honor those things. And it's also important for us to say, you know, like Dr. Eliza Presman always says, all feelings are welcomed, all behaviors are not. And then it's on us to really think about how can we better help them to express these emotions in a healthier way. And that's really first by allowing them to just process and sit with it. So pausing is really an important tool in helping you to stay calm and steady in a difficult situation, not run away with that reactive part of yourself. And in doing so, 9 out of 10 times, your kids calm down much faster. So same thing when my kids were older, and if let's say they rolled their eyes and I completely, bit back and said like, don't you ever do that, blah, 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 like whatever it was, it never helped the situation. Then it led into a deeper argument, more combative conversations. It really wasn't effective. So when I could pause and I could really just sit with that trigger, and then I could calm myself down. And all it took was 2 seconds, by the way. I wasn't pausing for like an exorbitant amount of time. I was just literally going, okay, feel the ground under your feet. That's a really good method. Let me name 3 things in my physical environment. So window, dishes, fork, right? You're just doing something that's called orienting. You're just doing something to sort of disrupt your pattern of you sort of reacting right away. And so in pausing, you're going to naturally calm down and your child will feel the difference and they too will begin to calm down. It used to even happen sometimes that I would pause and it was honestly for no more than 3 seconds. And my daughter would go, I'm sorry. Because even in the little bit of space that we created, she would realize what just happened. So it's really, really powerful, but don't attach yourself to what it's supposed to look like. Just do the inner work and the practice and kind of allow it to surprise you. Okay, number 2 is practicing stillness. I'm going to go through this one a little quickly because there's a lot to it. And again, I'm going to really dive into this into the free workshop. But stillness does not mean sitting in meditation for a very long time. That is not accessible. That is not always easy, especially for parents. But even if you're not a parent, maybe the idea of just sitting in meditation feels too daunting, too difficult. It is a practice. Meditation for some is really helpful. I love it. I do it 2 times a day, but that took a really, really long time and it is not where I started. So maybe just to begin with, you can do 1 minute of deep breathing in the morning. Maybe you just do 5 really deep cleansing breaths. Maybe you take 5 minutes to write in a journal about anything, something you loved, something that felt really good, something that really bugged you. Anything that comes to mind, what you hope for the day. Let's say you're doing the journaling in the morning and you can jot down some things that you want to see in the day. What's a really special memory that brings you so much joy every time it kind of comes back to mind? Journaling, anything along those lines, breathing, walking is so good. It's such a good somatic practice. Anne Lamott's husband, the world-renowned writer, always says that her husband says every problem can be solved with a 10-minute walk in nature. And it's so true. Like if you can get outside and just walk for 10 minutes, it's amazing how much it clears. And so what I'm getting at is when we practice stillness, what we're really doing is what I call emptying or completely releasing. It gives our thoughts, our emotions, all the things that are causing those ruminating thoughts, all the busyness, the chatter in our minds. We're really lightening our mental load when we do that, and we're giving it a space to go. We're just releasing it. And that really gets us ready for that next day, that next moment, that next challenge, that next joyous event, whatever it might be. And then number 3 is, how are we honoring simplicity? So let's go back to that conundrum of time situation. And I'm going to give you a reframe that somebody shared with me that was so valuable. My kids were at that age where they were both playing soccer competitively, and we were driving all over the place. I call this the Uber phase of parenting, where you're literally just picking up, dropping off, taking to, bringing from. Sometimes you're carpooling a lot of people. You are in your car all the time. That's how it felt for my husband and I, at least. And my kids really loved competing. They really loved physical activity and running and sports and being in soccer. I mean, it was really where you could see their cup really fill up. So they enjoyed it. There was a lot of joy there to it. And I remember I was talking to somebody and she was older. She's a grandparent. And I was saying like, oh, it's just exhausting. And I go here and we sit in traffic for an hour. And then by the time I drop her off and then I have to sit in my car and wait for her to finish. And I was kind of like being really kind of self-indulgent and just complaining about all the woes that I was going through. And she said to me, have you ever thought of just completely looking at it differently and just changing your perception on it? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, like, I'm a parent now. Obviously, my kids are older. I have grandkids. And I went through that same phase. And I can promise you a couple things. It comes and goes, doesn't last forever. And when I was in that phase of parenting, some of the things I used to say is, I am so grateful that I have them in the car with me for this hour because I can talk to them. They can share things with me. I can just be there with them. And this is a time in their lives that they're going to remember. And I get to support them and watch them in their joy while they do something before they get to the point where they're an adult. And honestly, they can do it for themselves at that point. And she offered me that reframe. And I started to look at it all with gratitude. And it isn't that I wasn't acknowledging the fact that I was tired. Sure, I was tired and I made different adjustments. But I simplified the mental load and I just started to say, you know what, how cool that I get to have them in the car with me for an hour. And then all of a sudden they started to take their headphones off and they started to ask me really cool questions. And when I think back on that time, my kids asked me some of the most important questions on those drives. We had some of the best conversations during those drives. We sang some of our favorite songs together at the top of our lungs. Tears were shed during those car rides, and they were frustrated about different things. And those were the moments where they really just were able to vent. So I think when I look back at it now, it's with such gratitude. And when she offered me that reframe, I didn't ever feel the same weight of the world stress again. It was something that I could then do with joy. I realized it was transient and it was going to end. And now I can say I'm not in it anymore. I'm not really going to practices and doing all of that. And it isn't that I miss it, I'll be honest. I loved it while I was in it, and I'm happy that I'm out of it. But I reflect on it with such joy and gratitude. My kids and I both, we talk about it all the time. We laugh at different things that came up at different tournaments and different places we got to travel to. I wouldn't trade it for the world. So the next time you find yourself in a complete, like, oh, I'm just so overwhelmed, I'm so exhausted, when will this end? Give yourself that reframe. Parenting is full of transient moments that come and go, phases that they grow into and grow out of before you know it. What could you be missing while thinking about how overwhelmed you are? What reframe could you have? What could you look at? What moment of joy could you have possibly been missing? Because we're just so consumed by our own exhaustion, which is fair, by the way. I had every right to feel tired. I was doing a lot. But at the same time, when I just made that simple switch and looked at it differently, it completely served me in a new way. So when I say honoring simplicity, that's what I mean. What's the simplest thing we could look at with joy? How can we look at something and say, you know what, this week looks really crazy to me. What are 5 things I can say no to? Or if I know I'm driving to practice all week and it's my turn, or maybe it's my husband doing some of the days, which days can I think about, like maybe picking up carry out on those days? Or can I meal prep over the weekend and have things ready for me? Or can I lean on a friend to carpool with because this week's feeling a little bit difficult? You got to do a check in and check back. And I'll talk about that process in the workshop too, but that's just the idea that we are present. We are honoring our needs. We are listening to what we need. We are thinking things through in a calm, collected way, not in an overwhelmed, irritated, agitated way. We're looking at it of like, where can I make the shift that I need to make? And even like me, it might need to be a mental shift just to get you through it so that you're not on that hamster wheel, constantly running and complaining, wondering when you get to come off. So the fourth tenet of my self-parenting process is really looking at change. Where can we embrace some change? I'll give you an example of how this can show up in parenting. How hard is it to ask for help? I know for so many parents, this is really, really hard. And I was working with a client recently, and she was really in the weeds. She really had a lot on her plate. There was multiple things going on in her life personally that were really draining and really taking a lot out of her. And I said to her, why don't you ask a friend for help with your son? And she really struggled with it. And she finally did. And they were so happy to help her. He loves going over to play at this person's house. She gets to help them too in return. And there was so much beauty that came out of that. And it was all because she was just struggling with this idea of like, a good mom does not ask for help. I don't see anybody else asking. We just do it alone, and that's how it's supposed to go. And so she had to change her thinking. She had to change what she was subscribing to, which is that she shouldn't be complaining. She should be able to do it all. She doesn't see other moms who have their own businesses having a hard time. And I had to explain to her, this is a season in your life where you need to lean on others, and everybody runs into those moments. So it was really important that she embraced change, walked through the fear of it because she was afraid to even ask of what it meant, how it would make her look, how she would feel if the person said no. We played out a lot of worst case scenarios. And ultimately, it was one of the best things that could have happened to her. And she really formed a great bond with this person too. So again, that's a really small example, but think about where you can embrace change. And specifically, if you're someone who's enduring a lot of stress as a parent, where can you embrace change as it pertains to the things you are subscribing to, the pressure you are putting on yourself, the shoulds, the have tos? What are you telling yourself it has to look like that could be adding additional stress where you don't need it? And the last one is honestly trusting your intuition. Just know it passes. The moment that you're in will get better. Sometimes when I just remind myself of all the moments in my life that I've thought, oh my goodness, this feels so arduous and hard, and I don't know, I don't see when it's going to get better. Every single time it has worked out. It has always worked out. And it has always worked out the way it was supposed to work out. And I can see that now in hindsight. So it's a really beautiful thing because now what I do is I just trust. My intuition just tells me, you're okay. It's going to be okay. Every time I have a little bit of a doubt, every time I have a little bit of a panicked feeling about something not working out the way I'm hoping it will, I release it, I let it go, and I trust what my intuition is showing me. Again, I'm going to talk more about this on the workshop because I think there's something really special about a parental intuitiveness when it comes to our kids. And I'm going to show you how to transfer that so that you can use it in your own personal life to face some of the harder things that we face as adults, and why we need to really build that trust muscle and tell our intuition that we are available and open. And it's really quite remarkable what starts to show up. And it's also quite remarkable what your kids gain in the process. So again, that's going to be September 25th on a Wednesday. And I would love it if you joined me. So go to the show notes there. Make sure you sign up. It is totally free, 60 minutes. Live replay will be available. And yeah, I just wanted to give you a little bit of stress management help today. So hopefully we can take a big deep breath together. I think there has to be a collectiveness or a feeling amongst the collective that we know change does need to happen. There needs to be societal changes. There needs to be systemic changes that take place. But at the same time, what can we do? How can we lean on that inner part of ourselves and utilize this personal process, the self-parenting process, to help ourselves heal so that we can show up as our best selves, not just for us, but also for the people we love. So thank you for listening. I hope that helped. And until next time.